Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Manton Reece, who is the CEO, founder, and boss in charge at Micro.blog. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me. Pretty good.
You know, this is just a wonderful and delightful thing that you have done, but this has been going on for a while. You started this in 2017, is that right?
Yeah, the very beginning of 2017, wanted to start the year with something new. Did a Kickstarter. Yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Have you always felt like that? I've been blogging since 2000, and I've always hosted my own thing, and I never really thought about the friction involved in like getting a domain, registering certs, and we wrote our own blog engine. Like, it just felt like a very natural time. We were all building the web, but for a lot of people, just getting a domain, that's too much, and signing up is too much. So,
yeah, it's true, and it's still hard for people. I mean, even today, we on Micro.blog, we can register the domain for you now, which helps a lot because they just type in the domain they want to register. We can configure it, and WordPress.com and other services do that same kind of thing now too. It helps a lot, but there's still so much confusion about like DNS records and this CNAME what and this A record what, and it's very confusing for people.
This is a silly example / analogy, but I really like interacting with B-level actors, not like your Tom Cruises that have a whole team, but like regular working actors. So whenever I watch a show, I'll go and I'll see like a secondary actor who's like killing it. And then I'll go and find them on social media and I'll give them a compliment. Hey, I saw you as Detective whatever on such and such a show. And inevitably they have an Instagram, then they have link in bio, and I click on it and it's an expired cert. It's a deactivated Squarespace site. It's a random, it's just a broken URL. It's not happened once. It's happened dozens of times. And I realize it's because, this is a regular person. They don't have a team.
Mm-hmm.
They just made a blog one day and they lost the password, or they didn't redo the cert, and their online presence doesn't exist anymore. And that's just so emblematic of like how URLs are rotting every day on the internet.
Yes. It's a really big problem. And if you go back, anybody who's been blogging, even just 5 years, 10 years, I mean, so many links are broken now. It's almost like the kind of default state that things expire and wither away. And it's an issue. One of the things that we do a couple things to try to combat that a little bit. Like when you link to things, we archive them, and there are all sorts of things behind the scenes. But also, once you've paid for your blog, we keep it if you don't want it anymore. Like unless you don't want it anymore, we keep it. So like just helping a little bit, things last on the internet. It's an issue. The Internet Archive is a huge help, but of course, they had an outage, last month or something. There, it is, even just having one copy of the web is not enough.
You did this in 2017, but it must have been in your head before that.
It was. I mean, I don't have the years in front of me, but I became really frustrated with Twitter, a few years before that, locking down developer access. And then before that, I've been blogging, since early 2000s, over 20 years now. And so blogging and just having your own space on the internet was always in my mind. And when I became frustrated with like centralized platforms having so much control and locking down our data and our accounts and what we can do, that sort of mixed with, the idea that, hey, you have your own space on the internet, you have your own domain name, you can do what you want with it. And that also unlocks different things that social platforms, I think, can do once you give people an identity, once you give them their own space. So that all sort of came together, and then I launched Micro.blog and just keep improving it ever since. I mean, it's just grown so much. It's not unrecognizable. The vision is exactly the same as it was 2017, but there's so much more that we've been able to add to it.
How many blogs are there?
I don't have that in front of me. We don't really advertise how many users.
But lots.
The blogs and accounts can have more than one blog too. So it's a little bit not an exact science, I guess, how you measure it.
You can't point to number of humans, but
yeah. And also I hate, so we actually, fediverse.org is a like aggregator for different fediverse sites, Mastodon and whatnot. And we are in that now. And so you can see like Micro.blog, like here's how many fediverse accounts there are. And like, it's up 1% or whatever. It's a really interesting way to look at stats on the fediverse. But I also always feel a little bit weird pointing to that because, there's spam accounts that people created.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. We're always fighting like people registering and trying to make content farms with just random text on the internet for whatever reason. And so the numbers are always a little bit,
That's
I don't
fair.
know,
It
flaky.
is reasonable to point out, if you use FediDB as an example, it's a good-sized European country, and certainly a billion plus posts out there in the fediverse, and Micro.blog being a big part of moving the fediverse around. The point though is that there's no one in charge, and I think that's the part that's so wonderful about all of this. Like whether it be, you know, RSS in the early days or ActivityPub, like it's just a bunch of people sitting around saying, how do we all own our own words and then move our words around in a way that makes everything interoperable? Like it's all about choice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like, there's something giving people a space, preferably they have their own domain name. We encourage people to have that, kind of be able to take their content back from just posting to Facebook, just posting to Twitter, X, Instagram, having their own photo blog. That's a huge thing. I mean, people love posting photos and sharing that stuff, but they just are frustrated with like, why are all my photos in Meta's control? Like, why can't I have that on my own site? And then if my own site can be connected to the larger Fediverse, so people on Mastodon can follow it, they can see when I've posted a photo. It's just very powerful. And I feel like we've been doing this so long. He said 2017, but I feel like we're still just scratching the surface of where this open social web can go.
Is it the frictionless sign up, or is it the algorithm, the infinite scroll algorithm, or is it the discoverability? What is it that keeps causing people or compelling people to sign up for walled gardens?
That's a great question. I mean, it is very easy. And I think there's a lot we can learn from walled gardens in terms of how they make it so effortless, how we can, because it is historically, it hasn't been hard to start a blog. I mean, you could fire up Blogger in the old days or Tumblr. It's fairly easy, but there's still friction, especially if you want to get your own domain name in the mix. There's little technical hurdles you have to jump through. So I think we can learn things from making it easier for users to get started,
Yeah.
but on an open platform. And then there is I think there is an addictive nature to some of these platforms where the algorithmic timeline's always showing you things you might want to see, and it's infinite. So you just keep reloading. And then this sort of dopamine hit of like, someone liked my post and someone retweeted this. And I think there is something there, the engagement part that gets people just, they keep coming back. And then of course, Facebook is emailing them if they're not coming back. Hey, you missed like these 3 posts that your friends posted. And we don't do any of that at Micro.blog. I feel like there are people that, not everybody, but there are enough people that want a sort of quieter space on the web. You can interact with people, but it doesn't feel like you're constantly being pulled back in.
Mm. When I started working in software 30 years ago, I went to work at a consultancy that did not want to be a big consultancy. They explicitly, this was during the first .com bubble, and everybody was trying to go public. And when I met the VP of this, the co-founder / VP of this thing, he says, "We are running a boutique here." And that word boutique has stuck with me for years because I just love it. It's like, I'm making a lovely little delightful shop here on Main Street. Stop by, enjoy the space, and then take off. But we're not trying to be Macy's. We're not trying to be the next big thing. How do you balance Microblog could take over the world and be the next big thing with your fundamental things you stand for, the protocols and the principles of the indie web?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when platforms get too big, new problems are created in terms of content moderation and, especially ad-based platforms. There's these incentives that a business is drawn to when they get really big. And I would love to avoid that. We never need to be a billion people, a million people. We are fine in the, tens of thousands, 100. If we ever had like 100,000 people, that would be like, we'd probably like have to shut things down and just like no more people. Because I think smaller platforms, there's benefits, especially on the Fediverse, where you have these smaller communities that can interoperate, and you can have like local people in that community kind of managing the community and dealing with reports of problems and staying on top of it. When you get too big, it just creates a lot of problems. So I like the boutique. I've never used that term to describe myself, but I like that. Small company doesn't need thousands of employees. I prefer it that way. Personally, I
Mhm.
think there's something to like the kind of small corners of the internet.
Yeah, Andy Baio was like, we should make the web weird again. It's like
Hmm.
we miss the weird web and just like GeoCities. That said, though, I did a lot of research and I've been poking around, and from going to Micro.blog, where are all the blogs? Discoverability seems to be a low priority because you're not going out of your way to say, look who's here. Like you could have
Mm.
George Takei and I would have no way of knowing because he's not on the homepage, right? So like, why
Yeah,
not make it so people can be seen? And that seems like a conscious decision.
it is a conscious decision, but there's always this balance, and we don't always get it right, I think. And so, one of the unique parts about Micro.blog is I had this idea that when you're constantly throwing, here's the trending hashtags, and you just constantly all these ways to like slice the fire hose of data and tweets together, it kind of creates problems for like different communities kind of clashing, and there's a potential for people piggybacking on other people's conversations and sort of being hateful. And like, there's just problems that pop up. So we've tried to take the opposite approach, a little bit quieter, a little bit slower. And in fact, the Discover section of Micro.blog is just hand curated. It's
Hmm.
not
Yeah.
automatic. It's not algorithmic. So there's a human actually going through and saying, like, here are some people and some posts recently that kind of a snapshot of what is on the network that you might find interesting. And it is limiting in some ways, and it is maybe just a little harder to find people sometimes.
Hmm.
And I acknowledge that. Like I said, like sometimes I think the balance is maybe too far in the other direction. Maybe we need to make it a little more easier to be discovered.
Sure.
But also that's part of blogs and the web. Like you start a blog, and at the very beginning, you are sort of writing into the void a little bit. And I think the people that are interested in Micro.blog and blogging, they have to be okay with that to start with. Like you're not going to start with 10,000 followers. You're going to start with just, there has to be a reason that you're writing and you're posting your photos and things that you want to share, even if you don't have millions of people looking at it. And so it is tricky. Yeah. But that's sort of the, the way we've, more slower, a little more hand curated, a little harder to discover people, but there's new ways that people are being discovered on social platforms that we can connect to also.
Hmm. I do like your statement about the quieter web. Like I'm on micro.blog/discover right now, just to give folks that are listening a bit of a sense of the kind of vibes we're talking about. You've got books and TV and music and podcasts, sure, but there's also bread and gardening and writing. You know what I mean? Like, and the first picture is like a picture of someone's backyard in the snow. It is, if you don't want an environment that shouts at you, this is probably the place to hang out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do want that, and that's not to say you shouldn't. And there's not like a lot of politics in there or like really divisive topics. Uh, we're not like censoring anyone. I mean, you can put whatever you know politics or any whatever thing you want on your own blog. It's your own space,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean it needs to be amplified to everybody. And so that's sort of where our Discover timeline comes into play. But
Hmm.
there's so much room for improvement too, and there's so many interesting things people are doing. Like I found that the Blue Skies, their starter packs, I thought were really interesting, where you're like, here are like 20 people that I recommend you follow when you get started. I
Right.
think there's things we can do like that. Um,
Well, so let
that
me
well,
cut you off there because there was a lot of tension in the early days of Twitter, 2006, 2007. I remember Anil Dash was one of the biggest, most followed people on. He was an early blogger, and he used to be one of the first people that anyone follow. And people would say, "Well, he got an unfair
mhm,
advantage
yeah,
because he's like, Twitter sign up person number 9. You sign up, and it's like, here's a couple of people to follow. Here's a couple people to follow is a starter pack of sorts." And
mhm,
then 3 days into Twitter, he's got 500,000 followers or whatever, and we're like, hey, hang on a second. So
right,
starter packs can draw attention to people who maybe don't want attention, but also could indirectly, and no hate to Anil, but I'm just
mhm,
using him as an example. Who's lucky enough to be in the starter pack? There's a thing
mhm,
happening on Threads right now where tech Threads is a thing that was invented by a bunch of people, and then Threads is making starter packs, complete ripoff of Blue Sky, and a bunch of the people who made tech threads are not in the starter pack. So then everyone's like, look at me. You just can't please anyone. So maybe you just
True.
be quiet and please no one.
So a couple of things on that. First of all, I think starter packs are interesting because they can be a little more distributed than that. Like you could have like thousands of starter packs for here's people that like are authors and people who love books and follow these people. And we actually we can connect with those starter packs now. You can link them on Micro.blog and follow those people, which is, I think, really powerful. But to your first point, I also remember the sort of Twitter follower list. And I think one of the problems was it was this kind of like global, like everybody follow these people. And they did sort of have an unfair advantage. And there was this snowball effect of like, well, yeah, once they're on that list, then they have 1 million followers. And then everybody thinks they're amazing because they're going to have, 1,000 times more likes than everybody else. And I think it's better to get back to like the content speaking for itself. So on our Discover page at the very, very beginning, 6-7 years ago, we had something like, here are some people to follow, and we pretty quickly scrapped it. And instead, it's kind of a snapshot of here are recent posts in reverse chronological order. So instead of being about people, it's about the content. So yeah, that post of someone's backyard with the snow, like if you like the photos that they're posting, follow them. And it also naturally kind of turns over because it's recent posts. So I'm very conscious of this. I think it is a problem when people gain a certain amount of followers and then they just sort of naturally become more and more popular. And somewhere in Micro.blog, we have an article or a blog post that's like, it's not a popularity contest. It's not about like counts. It's not about follower counts. We don't show follower counts anywhere.
Yeah.
So like if you like that photo of the snow and you think they're going to post more beautiful photos or you like what they're saying, follow them. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be affected by the fact that photo got 10,000 likes versus someone who posted a photo that was also amazing that only got 5 likes.
There's a fundamental concept called posse: publish on your own site, syndicate elsewhere. Can you talk about posse and why that's so fundamental?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of getting back to taking your content, like you post to your own site first. Instead of like thinking about like, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to tweet something or I'm going to post a photo to Instagram. I post to my own blog where I control it. And then I copy it out to other platforms so that I can still stay connected to people. So yeah, Posse is a long time like indie web principle. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. Of course, in Micro.blog, we have built-in ways to like automatically cross-post out to Mastodon, Blue Sky, whatever. And unfortunately, there's still some platforms that have locked down like public APIs. So it's kind of harder to automatically post to like Instagram, for example. But there are enough that do it that it's just a great way. You post to your own site, you control it, you can do whatever you want. You can, customize your own site. You have ownership of it. You can switch, hosting providers, but you send a copy out automatically to, Blue Sky. And then you have the followers there that can see what you're up to. So it's kind of in some ways, it's like kind of a compromise, admitting that not everybody is going to have my blog in their RSS reader. That's okay. There are some people that just are on social networks, and I also want to reach those people.
Yeah. And then the inverse of that is publish elsewhere, syndicate to your own site, which is it's pull versus push. And, honestly, I have done both and neither of these by just simply using the clipboard. Like people will constantly email me. How are you doing that? How are you copying to Mastodon and Blue Sky? Just clipboard.
Yeah. And so some people prefer that too, because then you can kind of like tweak each one a little bit for each network. That's fine.
Yeah. But I have to say though, I am always impressed when I see someone, I use Tantic or Andy Bio as an example, where it's like you go to their website and it's clear that it all starts there. And then it finds its way out. But most of those are bespoke. And I think Micro.blog is a great way to get that kind of an experience with, and you've done all the engineering.
Yeah, and we tried to, I built it that way. The very first version of Micro.blog didn't have, we call it kind of cross-posting, because Posse, it feels a little technical sometimes, but it's catching on as a term now, so I think we'll probably use it more than we did a few years ago. But we didn't have cross-posting out to other networks. And I added it for Twitter because I was frustrated that there weren't any good solutions out there for copying to Twitter in a way that I was happy with. So like there were places that could automatically copy your posts, but like a link, they put like links in back to your blog that I didn't want. Like I wanted, if I had a short post on my own blog that was just like 100 characters, I wanted it to feel like a tweet when it was copied out to Twitter. So that's where it started, where I got to build my own thing. And then from there, now we have like, I don't know, 8 or 9 different services that we support. And each one is coded specifically for that API. So it adapts the post as best it can to, thinking about like if it needs to be truncated, if there needs to be a link, if it needs to upload photos to that service, that it tries to do the right thing automatically.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that I want to hit as we get towards the end here, which I think is impossible, and I want to understand how you're doing it, is Micro.1. It's $1 a month. Like, that's amazing. And I want to call this out because you have 3 plans, Micro.1, Micro.blog, and Micro.blog Premium. It's $1, $5, or $10. We're literally talking about less than a cup of coffee here. And you know how when you have like your 3 plans and the thing you want is always on premium? Well, Micro.1 literally host your own domain name, photo hosting, podcast hosting. How is that possible? How are you going to make money on that? How can you even do the domain name for $1 a month?
Yeah. Well, so the domain name, we'll host the domain name for you, but the registration fee is separate.
Okay.
That's not included in the $1.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah. Cause that would be,
I don't want you to
impossible.
lose money. I'm just like, what's going on?
Yeah. It's a new experiment. We just launched it a week ago. I don't 100% know, to be honest with you, how it's going to play out. And I joke with people that like, I had to sort of secretly build and launch this because I know people would talk me out of doing it. But I love these simple prices. Like I love the Micro.blog, the standard plan is $5 a month. It's always been $5 a month. It will always be $5 a month, probably. Like everybody else increases their prices or uses like trick pricing or gimmicky, like, yeah, this is the most popular plan of the 3. I love just like simple, it's $5. Most people, I can't say most people. There are a lot of people in the world that can't afford $5 a month as an extra cost. But a lot of people, it's a no-brainer. People that are getting their coffee, like you said, $6. So,
I mean, for people in the global South, $1 a month could be a very reasonable thing. But $5 a month is still like $60 a year. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Money.
And so hopefully the $1 a month will really be able to reach more people. That was the idea, is like, can we reach more people for like getting back to friction and like making it easier to sign up? $1 is still friction for some people. Some people just will not pay anything, and that's fine.
I mean, you need a credit card. That's friction.
You need a credit card. You do need a credit card, and a lot of that, the making people put a credit card in. To be honest, a lot of it's just like, I don't want spammers using it. Like we've been burned with people just like signing up free accounts, and I think that's only going to get worse with like just AI generated slop everywhere on the internet. So you have to put a credit card in. For $1, there's not even a trial. You pay $1 if you think it's worth it. If you don't, you move on. And there's other free options out there like Tumblr or just keep posting wherever you're posting. So it's a little bit of an experiment. We do include a whole bunch. But so far it's working. Like I feel like we are reaching more people. People are excited about it. And it's simple. Yeah. Micro.1 is $1. I try to make it as simple as possible, and it includes so many things. Like it includes things that like you'll find on like a $25 a month.
Yeah,
hosting plan.
Yeah, photo hosting, podcast, and if you upgrade for $5 a month, you get automatic cross posting to Threads and Blue Sky and other services. So
and no limit too. Like a lot of places are like you can only cross post to 3 places, but unless you pay more. And no, there's no limit. You can post as many places as you want.
Now, from a technical perspective, as a dev myself, like you started in Jekyll years and years ago, but are you still on Hugo now?
On Hugo now, yeah. We moved from Jekyll to Hugo. I really like Hugo, and I think at this point we are so tied into it with custom themes and plugins. We'll probably just stick with it forever. In theory, we could support multiple blogging engines, and we do support multiple Hugo versions. So like we'll default to one that we know is compatible with like all the built-in themes. But if you want to kind of be in the Wild West and use a more recent version of Hugo, go for it. And a lot of people hopefully won't even think about this, but it allows a lot of power rather than inventing our own like template language, like the fact that you could take a Hugo blog and like a theme and import it into Micro.blog essentially. There's not like an import button, but like you could copy it and tweak the themes so that they work with
Yeah.
your blog. There's a lot of flexibility in there. Like I'm confident that like no one will ever say like there's something they can't do because we
Yeah.
are like behind the scenes, we're powered by that engine.
And I wanted to call out Hugo just because I'm personally a fan of like simple, whatever your architecture is, whoever's listening to this show, whatever your website architecture is too complicated. Like if you have a blog, if you wrote your own blog and you hit, you HTTP get to an article and that involves opening up a database connection or hitting something or for looping over anything, that's too much. A static site generator, like it harkens back to a simpler time because it was, not only was it a simpler time, it's just not freaking necessary to open it. Like I'm so shocked when you hit like database not there, like when you hit a WordPress site, oh, the database, why are you hitting a database?
Right.
It's the same blog post that it was earlier today. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah. That was a big part of the thinking with this is that, yeah, I mean, WordPress, it got a bad rap for a while. It's actually pretty good now with caching.
No, I'm not disrespecting WordPress. I'm just simply saying from a architecture perspective.
Absolutely. From an architectural standpoint, it's like, why do we have to have that extra hit? And so in Micro.blog, it's actually architected with like things are split across multiple servers. So like the main platform does a lot of things. It does the API, it does the interface, it does everything. But at the end of the day, once it runs through the publishing platform, it really just copies static HTML files that are served completely separate from the platform. So for example, if we have an outage or something, your blog is probably going to stay online. It's still going to be super fast. So there are kind of clever things we've done to link those systems together, but it really is static files. And I really like that.
Yeah, it is one thing to have an outage across like something running in Kubernetes across multiple servers, but it's like it's HTML files on a disk. You know what I mean?
Right.
With Nginx in front of it. There's not a lot of things that can go wrong.
Exactly.
And I assume that back to the $1 at Micro.1, that allows you to keep things easily priced. Like you wouldn't be able to do this if there were databases and big giants of things in the background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Keep it as simple as possible. There is complexity behind the scenes, but like, yeah, that serving of static files is pretty simple and it hasn't really changed since the beginning of the web in some ways. And also, I think it will help us scale. The only thing I worry about really with the pricing is like photo storage, that sort of thing can get costly. And so for example, we don't have a limit on how many photos you can post.
Right. So there's abuse potential there.
There could be like, I think somewhere in our terms of service, it's basically like, as long as you don't use it as like your own like photo backup system, like as long as you're using it for its intended purpose.
Yeah, it's Flickr. It's not Google Photos.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's potential for abuse. There is potential that maybe someone paying $1 were actually not making any money off of that. But like I said, it's a bit of an experiment. And so far, I really love the reaction to it.
I really like the transparency of it as well. Like on my account page here, there's a very specific call out on, do you want us to use AI or not? And you explain in like simple language, like we will use our own services, our own servers, our local models, or OpenAI. We will not train your data. We will not use your data. And you don't want to use it, you turn it off.
Yep.
And it's just for like summarizing photos and doing podcast transcripts,
Yeah. And I love the AI feature. Like it's so, I love just being able to post a photo and it can like auto generate keywords that I can search, or like it'll help me with like accessibility text, alt text, like it'll put something in there and then I can copy it and edit it. But some people they are very worried about AI.
And that's valid.
They just want a way to just opt out completely. And so we have that checkbox, you opt out and no AI will touch your content at all. And having that global checkbox was actually really nice because I think it enables us in the future to do more AI without worrying that every single time we launch an AI feature, there's some people that are going to push back and say, what about the energy use or the environmental costs or this and that? And I think the checkbox gives us an answer, which is just like, we hear your concerns. You can just completely opt out.
Right.
But for people who want it, it's really just a useful tool.
Yeah, and if it were me, I would probably say use local AI versus use open AI. Like maybe I don't mind it if Micro.blog does it locally with an open model on your
Yeah.
own servers, but I don't want it going out of the building. Let
Yeah,
me ask
that's
you this.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Last question. So you sign up. I'm here at micro.blog/account. What's the thing that I should do first? Because I went directly to edit sources and cross posting. And I'm like, I'm a completionist. Add Medium, add Mastodon, add LinkedIn, add Flickr. Like, what's the best way for me to get the most experience if I sign up for this and I don't know what I should do to like
Hmm.
incorporate micro.blog into my lifestyle?
Great question. I I guess if you're super plugged into other platforms, that may be a good place to start is to enable some of those services. Maybe not all of them, but yeah, you enable a few so that your posts will cross post out to those.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would say also if you have existing content that you're not happy with where it is, import it. So we support import from like WordPress and Ghost and all sorts of random things. And I like that gives people a way to move their content in. Of course, there's export in different formats too. They can get their content out if they want to move away. But those two things I think are good places to start. Like figuring out what data you want to come in. Like, is this a replacement for an existing blog, or is this just like a new microblog that maybe you set up like a subdomain for that it's like in addition to some of the other things that you have on the web.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would start with those two things. Domain name, yeah, like thinking about like, do you want a domain name for this, or do you want just to just kind of stick with the defaults? It's a great
Yeah.
question. I'm actually not
You know
totally
what I
sure.
mean? Like,
It
because
depends
I
a
feel
lot
I
of what
feel
you.
like I'm asking for like onboarding from an expert, because like
Yeah.
you could go and do a whole onboarding thing, but I could see pointing non-technical parent to this, and it's like, what's the next thing you should do to get the most out of it? Like, are you just looking for a place to yap, or are you a social walled garden expert and you
Hmm.
want to aggregate all of
Right.
this stuff?
Yes.
Do you want to do Posse?
Hmm.
Because this could be the place for you. And then the last thing I want to call out, which is a compliment but also specific to my audience, is that you can export this to GitHub. You always have control of you could connect this to GitHub and export an archive of your stuff. And I just want to give you kudos for that, because I'm as I explore micro.blog, I've never felt like I'm trapped
Yeah.
or stuck here, which I think is also a really cool design style.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a big part. I mean, we'd be hypocrites if we said, we believed in the open web and moving content around, but like good luck getting your content out. So, I like that too. There's a couple things related to that we've done that I like. Like one, there's a checkbox for every time you post to your blog, we ping the Internet Archive to make a
Mm-hmm.
copy of the blog post. I like that as a way to have a like automatic sort of poor man's backup way.
Mm-hmm.
And then also that GitHub mirroring. We've tweaked it a few times and I think it'll still evolve. Right now, it's like about once a week, it basically takes all your posts and photos and copies them to a GitHub repository. And there's overhead in that. So I think we'll continue to tweak that. But we also have like normal export and also export that includes photos. Like that's one thing that has bugged me about some blogging platforms is like, oh, here's all your text, but like, how do you get those photos out? Like those are actually a big part of everything. So yeah, there's more to do, but you got to be able to get your content out. Otherwise people won't believe that it's a safe place for their stuff.
Yeah. Well, I want to give a plug to a blog post I wrote in a way of giving a plug to your stuff. In 2012, I wrote a blog post called Your Words Are Wasted. And I talked about how we're throwing our keystrokes into walled gardens. And this is 13, 14 years ago. It was true then. It was true in the year 2000 when I started the blog. Your blog is the engine of community, and that's where it needs to start. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I need to make a blog, but I don't know where to start, and there's 40 different ways to do it. Micro.one, this is not a sponsored ad. It is an absolutely delightful, completely affordable place for you to have blogging with your own domain name and then post it and connect it to the larger internet. So I love that you're making the web weird again. And it was great to have you chat with me today.
Thank you so much for the shout out. I really appreciate talking through this. And yeah, it's an exciting time for the web right now. I think I hope people are really thinking about where they should put their stuff, whether it's on Micro.blog or somewhere else. Like there's so many options now. It's
Put
great.
it somewhere. Post the draft. If you have a
Yep.
draft, post that draft.
Yep. Yeah. And don't overthink it. Like it's okay to just throw something out on the web and kind of see what sticks and see where you want to go. Like I go back to my first my first blog post, 20 plus years ago. My first blog post was something like, there are already too many blogs, but I guess I'll create, one now. And of course, it was like so long ago. There were way, way, way more blogs now. And I think some people think like, what do I have to say? What do I have to share that is interesting? But everybody has a story. Everybody has something.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thanks so much.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.